And I think we're live. So hello, everybody. Today we're talking about decoding Google's algorithm, the SEO game changer, or the end of the game. Like we will hear the thoughts of Kevin Indig about it. An amazing person. If you don't know Kevin yet, please give him some applause, and say welcome on the chat. Kevin is a growth advisor and partner at Hypergrowth. He worked at and helped with strategies of SEO at companies like Shopify, G2, Atlassian, and many more. I've known Kevin for the last couple of years, like we've met in New York. He has just amazing newsletter. If you don't know it, Growth Memo, go to Kevin, find Kevin on LinkedIn, find Growth Memo and subscribe to that. This is just amazing. So welcome, Kevin, and hi to everybody.
Tom, thanks so much for having me. It's great to be on.
So just so everybody knows, the way we work here on the webinar, if you have any comments, if you have any questions to Kevin, just write it in the comments. I'll try to ask Kevin all the questions. I have my own questions prepared, so if nobody asks questions, that also good. There's plenty of interesting stuff that I have written down in my questionnaire. So without further ado, let's start with the webinar. So looking back in time, when you worked with giants like G2, Shopify, Atlassian, can you share some universal lessons on organic growth in tech that you picked up along the way?
Sure. So we're gonna do some conceptual ones and then maybe some tactical ones. On the conceptual side, all of these companies execute in a very speedy manner and they measure things very carefully. So if there's a few things about how all of these companies think, what they have alike, I would certainly bring it back to execution. And I see this in very successful startups as well. I had last year worked for a whole year with Ramp, which is one of the fastest growing fintech startups in the world, and they show exactly that behavior. The teams move incredibly fast. The executives and leadership have a high sense of urgency, and at the same time, they measure things very carefully, and they have a very high fidelity to what they execute, right? So things like, oh, I've seen this somewhere else, or I have an idea. Those don't lead, to new things or tactics or levers. But if there's a logical chain of arguments or a data behind these things, then that gets things on the street, right? So it's a combination of fast and measured that really makes these companies successful. Now, from a tactical perspective, there's certainly basics are being done extremely well, right? We talk about content quality, for example. There's a high degree of, or a high bar for content to go out, whether that's self-created content, like on a blog, for example, blog articles, or whether that's lead generation tools, or it's user-generated content in the case of G2. You can apply that same content there and say, okay, how can we make sure that only high-quality content is surfaced to users and search engines, right? These are, they sound very obvious, but there's a lot of depth and complexity that goes into guaranteeing that you surface high quality. And then, the other side of the thing or the coin is that from a tactical perspective, all of these companies have a very high page efficiency. And what I mean by that is that they only surface pages to Google's index or to users that have a high degree of quality. They're very good at cleaning up, at site hygiene, if you will, and being very thorough and intentional about what they let Google see. I'm going to pause there because it's obviously a topic that I can talk on for hours, but I wanted to provide a spectrum of, kind of mindset or corporate culture and tactical stuff that all these companies are doing.
So one word that I got and I love it is measure, because when I'm talking to many people, I can hear that let's do thought leadership content. That's my favorite. Or let's do product led content. And I'm asking them well, okay, how will you measure if that works or not? How will you know if you succeeded? It's no, we're doing thought leadership content. It's okay.
Right. It's what are you optimizing for, right? That's a common question I heard at all these companies. What are we optimizing for? What's our North Star? And these are the same questions, right? And so these companies and successful companies in general, they have a very high discipline to only prioritize things that truly matter for their North Star metric, right? And so to your example about thought leadership, sure, it can work, right? But the question is like, what's the end goal here? And what is the metric or number you can look at to know if you come closer to that end goal? And some of the best companies, they don't just spend 5 minutes thinking about that. They spend a lot of time thinking about that. And they develop a filter like my glasses here that they wear all the time that filters everything out that is not relevant for their North Star. So they're really good at focusing.
And they're actually defining what they will measure up front. So if you wait until the end, you will justify the hell out of it to prove that you were right. Like, so you have to start with a hypothesis in the beginning, like where you're heading and how you will define like that you succeeded. Okay, so I have a next question because like we're in interesting times. Like we had a small chat before the meeting, and definitely AI and the whole like situation with Google and Google algorithms updates and plans for next updates is like extremely interesting. Where do you see us like right now with the helpful content update, the upcoming rollout of SGE? What do you think is happening right now?
Yeah. It's a transition phase. I think that's really important to understand. For the last, very high level, I would group different decades by Google at Google into the following, right? So you had that initial starting phase in the 90s where it was just, like people didn't think that much about gaming Google. And then you had the 2000s, from 2000 to 2010, and there was very black hat heavy, right? Like lots of gaming, very simple systems. And then you had 2010, 2020, and that's when Google really tightened the screws on quality, link spam, any type of spam, right? And also set the ground for some more AI. And then you have the post, post 2020, you could say, but probably started a bit earlier already, where Google use a lot more AI in their systems to surface quality content for indexing and all these kind of other things, right? And so right now, we're actually in a transition where AI poses a potential threat for Google. And we have to unpack what that means because there's a lot to it. And AI changes the market and market dynamics from two sides. One side is on the Google side, right, where they can use AI more to better understand relevance of content and authority and all that other stuff, right? I mean, our modern AI systems are invented by Google, right? With the invention of the transformer, they basically laid the groundstone for all these other things that we're seeing today. So that's one side. The other side that is often disregarded is how the content suppliers use AI as well, right? And so we're slowly starting to see more of that. But I would argue that next year or the year after, we're going to see a massive challenge that Google has to face, where people use more AI to create content, and sometimes in masses, right? So on the one hand, you'll have these small content creators who maybe post in a forum, or they write a blog article or an email newsletter, and they might use AI for the majority of that. But then you will also have actors, maybe bigger companies, who will use AI to create millions of pages. And that really changes the dynamics. Until now, pretty much, or maybe until last year, the limiting factor for content supply on Google was just how much content people can create. So at G2, for example, we had over 30 writers because we wanted to create a lot of content ourselves, and there was a competitive advantage. That competitive advantage is now, going away very, very quickly. And that changes the whole ecosystem on Google, how they surface content, how they index content, what they index, and what their value is of the search engine, right? Because so far the value was that you go to a search engine and you ask a question, and the search engine will bring you to human created content that is the best answer. But theoretically already, right, we have Google SGE. Google can answer these questions directly, but it also means that they're sending less traffic to other websites. And it also means that maybe if they don't answer the question directly, maybe somebody else floods Google with so much AI content that they then have to send a lot of traffic to competitor. So long story short, I'm really getting into the weeds here, but the whole ecosystem of Google is changing as a result of AI. And we are in a transition where Google faces these challenges and problems, and at the end of the transition, Google will have an answer to how they deal with these problems. And the answer, or what the end game looks like, it's a whole spectrum. It could be that Google detects AI content and bans it from a platform. It could be that Google answers most questions themselves. It could be that another competitor to Google gains significant market share and the glory days of Google are over, right? There's a whole spectrum of potential outcomes.
I love your answer, because I agree. For me, 2023 was a year where basically AI was crawling. Even if we feel that GPT-4 was amazing, our way of using it is basically was as a search engine. And because of that, the results were I would say mostly weak. But there's more and more tools that are doing research and feeding AI with knowledge, and then it starts to actually work as it should. It's a language model, so it evaluates what we deliver, and it's basically able to get the information from what we provide. And I think more and more tools will be more sophisticated in this way, that will provide additional information into AI, and that will rise up the level of the quality of the content that will be produced and the scale that it will be produced. And it will not be that easy to differentiate it from any other content. So let's see how it goes. What Google does, I'm really curious. I wouldn't like to be in their shoes. It's tough days for Google, really tough.
Yeah, same. I also wouldn't want to be Sundar Pichai right now. And I know I'm dishing out a lot against Google, but the reality is also that they have some of the smartest people in the world, and they're doing their best. So it's a tough call. It's a tough position to be in.
Okay, so I have one question from Sachi. What's your take on Gartner's prediction for drop in search volume?
Yeah, I think if I remember correctly, the Gartner prediction was that by 2028, 50% of searches go to AI chatbots. And please correct me if I'm off. I don't have the prediction in front of me, but that's what I remember top of my head. And so it's obviously an aggressive prediction, but I think it's absolutely possible to get there. And the reason I'm saying that is because web traffic is highly concentrated on a few keywords, right? So a few keywords get the absolute majority of searches. Oftentimes they're brand keywords, right? So lots of people search for Facebook or TikTok or those kind of things. But then you also have a lot of simple questions like weather, for example, is one of the highest search queries because people want to see what the weather is on that day where they are. But I think that prediction is a little bit misleading only because that type of web traffic goes to AI chatbots or LLMs does not mean that the financial ecosystem of the web dies in the same way, right? So I want to differentiate between just traffic and potential revenue from traffic. And so I could see that 50% of these simple searches go to chatbots or voice devices or something else. But that doesn't mean that 50% of traffic from the web goes away. That's a different conversation. I could actually see a scenario, and I wrote about this in a memo, where maybe websites get a lot less traffic from Google because Google answers many basic and simple queries themselves. But maybe the traffic that they get converts even better because people are further along the purchase journey or user journey, and they have spent a lot of time on Google, where Google got them through these decisions faster, and now they're ready to convert, and that's why the traffic you get is of higher quality. That would actually be a good thing, because one problem that we struggle with right now is that a lot of the traffic is very noisy. SEO impact can be hard to measure unless you're in e-commerce or in a consumer app where the conversion is very straightforward, right? But in something like SaaS or enterprise, it can take time and it can be very fussy to measure the impact of SEO. And that outcome would make it much, much easier because we know that traffic correlates to a much stronger degree with conversion. So that's how I personally see that playing out potentially. But it's a long time until 28. 4 years during those times can mean a lifetime. And so I always want to caution people that obviously there's a high chance I'm wrong.
Yeah, just to add to it, Sachi said that the search volume dropped by 25% by 2026. So this is the data. My prediction, with these non-click searches, looking from the UX perspective, purely from the UX perspective, if I have like a recipe for making a pizza, like it will not fit like UX wise into Google. So like they have to send like the traffic. That's my opinion. Somewhere like they will not be able to post like the whole recipe for a pizza or anything else. Like so, and in the last few years, we could see the trend that the length of the content grew. Like definitely, it grew like a lot from like let's say 1,000 words. Like right now, it's probably doubled in the last 2 years or 3 years. So right now it's like up. So it will just not fit in Google. Like, so they have to send it somewhere. That's my opinion. But let's see. So having my next question. So given the increased role in the AI search, what do you believe is the future of organic SEO practices?
Yeah, man. If I knew for 100%, I would start a company around that. But reality is that again, on a serious note, right? The economics, the unit economics of SEO change. So if you are a company that has to create the content themselves, I call these companies integrators. Um, the value of classic search content is right now highly inflated, and it's going to be inflated even more. So anything you do that can be replicated by a chatbot or by a large language model, that the value of that is getting very close to zero. And so the value of things like content that is more based on, say, experience or relatability is going through the roof, because that's something that machines cannot recreate. Machines cannot have an experience in the same way that humans can. They can summarize reviews, for example, across the web, but they cannot go and try out the tool themselves, or they cannot go to a beach and a hotel and then write about that hotel themselves. So they're reliant on the experience of humans. And that is a way to differentiate yourself from machine generated content. The second thing is you can, or I think that we'll spend a lot more time creating little widgets and calculators and little applications and programs on our website, probably with the help of AI, that are a step up from content, right? So right now, what we essentially do is with content, we try to solve our customers' problems or get their attention so that they sign up for a product or buy our product or whatever. Unless we're talking about e-commerce or local search, I think a lot of content will be replaced by little tools, and these tools will then help you actually solve the problem. And you can create those with AI. You can already do that, right? But it's much harder for machines to copy. And I don't see ChatGPT or Gemini or Perplexity building those same set of tools. They're more about the answers, right? So I think tools are one antidote, and then of course there's a whole different ball game for companies that do not create the content themselves, the aggregators who can scale SEO with user-generated content or a product inventory. And examples would be eBay, G2, TripAdvisor, Uber Eats, Instacart, right? They all have either user-generated content like reviews, or they have a product inventory like a grocery that they use to scale SEO. And for them, it's going to be a completely different game. I think they're less vulnerable to AI because their offering is so much closer to the actual product, right? So on G2, for example, G2 aggregates reviews by category, like software category, or by a brand, and that's basically almost a product, right? So if you sign up for G2, you get more software reviews, and so the closer your content is to the product, I think the less vulnerable you are to AI, simply because the AI will then send you right to the product or to what solves your problem. But if you create the content yourself, you're further away from the product, because you write about blog articles that are address different stages of the funnel, and so that makes you much more vulnerable to AI. And I think the solve there, or the solution, is tools and other creative things that are not content.
I loved what you said about like humans and their experience and adding it to the content. This is something that we can like really give into the content, because as you mentioned, like AI doesn't have these experience that we have. Like they don't talk to the customers, they don't talk to the product team, they don't talk like to many people, they don't go through all these situations that we go. I call it basically cyber method. So like humans working with AI together, because we as humans have superpowers, like AI has superpowers. Let's combine them. Let's not fight AI. Like, I'll be honest, like we can't like fight it. Like in most cases, like in many cases, like we're just not able to. Like it can read faster than we do. It can take like certain things from the text like much faster than we do. But we can add our own expertise into the things. And this, like with this, I have a question. Do you actually think that, like, look, everybody, like, we're predicting the future, like we are looking into a crystal ball, like we don't know what will happen. So do you think Google will actually promote human written content, like, or human generated content, like on top of AI generated content?
It's a difficult question because Google is being forced by new technology to make a decision, right? And that decision is technology is pretty much so good that it can answer many simple questions better than a website. But sending traffic to website is kind of part of Google's core value, right? Again, they have to keep that ecosystem alive for many reasons. I also wrote about the monetary aspects, right? They also do make money from sending traffic to websites with their own ad network, right? So there's many implications here. But the reality is that Google will most likely answer queries themselves before sending them to a website that uses AI to answer the query. You know what I mean? So there was this law that Google still upholds, which is that they don't want to send traffic to another search site, right? So they're like, we're already a search site. We want to send people to the direct results, right? And so there are actually very famous cases where big brands, big marketplaces indexed search sites and then got penalized, quote unquote, penalized by Google. Not a manual penalty, but an algorithmic penalty, because Google doesn't want to send traffic to other search sites, because again, it's a meta problem. I could see the same thing with simple answers that AI can answer or that Google can answer themselves, right? Why send somebody to another website? Why not spare them the click and give them the answer right away? Again, the challenge for Google is that they cannot do that with all the queries or all the searches. First of all, because it's just not possible in some regards. But in other regards, also because they will destroy the web ecosystem that keeps them alive, right? And they cannot just simply go from not sending traffic, from sending traffic to not sending traffic overnight. That's not how these things work. And Google would obviously destroy a massive part of the economy. So that being said, I can see a slow progression where Google is already showing featured snippets, which is part of an answer. I think they will do more of that in the future, probably driven by SGE to some degree, and then carefully define which queries to answer directly and which queries to send traffic to other websites.
Like, I would also add to that, like, my prediction that Google has to train LLM in the future on something. And if they don't send traffic to other websites, like, it will be the same case as with New York Times, like that. Everybody will sue Google that, like, why are you using my data for training if you're not giving anything back? Like, so right now, of course, like, it will answer certain things. But in 3-4 years, if they block all the new content and they can't train on the new content, that's a two-edged sword.
Yeah, it's a tricky one, man. The genie is out of the bottle. You're not going to get that back. I don't think the New York Times lawsuit is moving forward, to be honest. What I can see much more happening is that Google and OpenAI and Perplexity and Mistral and all these other LLM developers, they're essentially going to license content from content producers to train their models. Reddit is a good example. Reddit just disclosed or announced that they have a deal with Google, where Google gets access to their API, pays Reddit $60 million, which is pretty low for my to my taste, right? And so, but then you also have things like Common Crawl crawling the web. Common Crawl is a nonprofit that crawls the web and makes that data publicly accessible. That has already been used for LLM training, and so. There's obviously some legal questions. I'm not a legal expert, so I'm not going to attempt to answer them. But I think that Genie already is out of the bottle. These LLMs have been trained. And the question is, do they need even more of that data in the future? Or is the data that LLM developers have enough? Can they produce synthetic data, artificial data that is enough for training purposes? Can they use some of the user feedback signals they get already to train their models? Or can they get access to other content that maybe older books or that kind of stuff, newspapers, etc., that is also indicative. Now, the thing is, I'm not an LLM developer myself, but the challenge with data for LLM makers is right now it's a volume game, right? They just need as much volume as possible, but it's also a quality challenge, and that quality challenges increases. So the first stages of LLM training are just about feeding as much data as possible, but then the later stages that we're now approaching are quality data. And that's in part why LLM developers are so interested to work with publishers, because they have journalists who are literally trained and educated to write, and they write high quality stuff. Whereas, if you go to web forums, you see a lot of low quality stuff there as well. So not all the stuff on the web is good for training LLMs. And so again, the question is, how much more data do they need? What are the quality trade-offs of hard to get sources of content versus easy to get sources of content? And isn't maybe another advantage even more important, like more chips or more cloud power or these kind of differentiators? So a lot to unpack there, but I'm not sure if those lawsuits are going to have a leg to stand on. And I think these LLM developers will either get out of those lawsuits or just license some of these publishers. To be frank, I think some of them should just buy publishers. I think, it's probably simplified, right? But I would wish OpenAI would just buy, definitely not the New York Times, right? But maybe, I don't know, like similar to how Jeff Bezos bought the Washington Post, and a publisher of that caliber, and fund them so that journalism can continue. And on the other hand, they have free reign to train their LLMs on that data output as much as they want.
Okay, so let's get back to a little bit of SEO. Actually, I have a question, and Gabriel also added a question that is connected to my question. So, reading your Growth Memo newsletter, if anybody is not subscribed to Growth Memo, go there. This is Kevin's newsletter. That is just amazing. You've mentioned about your predictions about rolling out SGE by Google. Is it happening or not? So adding to my question, Gabriel wrote, how do you see Google's SGE AI impacting tofu mofu bofu queries for SaaS companies in 24?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Gabby. And thanks for the question as well, Tom. So here's my spiel about SGE, and then I'm going to talk about SaaS stages of the SaaS funnel, how SGE might impact them. So my theory about SGE is that Google treats it like a reservist, like a soldier who's not in active duty, but could be ready for active duty at any time. And that soldier trains and is being trained and gets better, but only becomes active when there is a war. And so I think Google continues to build SGE, continues to improve and learn, but they will not launch it in its current form unless they're forced by somebody else, right? So if, for example, we hear some news that Perplexity gains a lot of market share from Google and more people use ChatGPT instead of Google, if that increases and continues, there will be a point at which Google is forced to unleash SGE into the open world, so to say. The challenge is, again, for Google, SGE is not as easy to monetize, and they make I think close to $200 billion a year from just Google search. So they're hesitant, obviously, to cannibalize their own cash cow, but they will have to if it means they're losing market share. I think what's much more likely is that Google will develop small features in SGE, and if they're successful, they will break them out and launch them into public search. One example is in e-commerce. When you search for specific shopping terms like men's sneakers, blue dress, or those kind of queries, Google now shows you a carousel of different products. And in that carousel, in a thumbnail, you see smaller thumbnails that are more expensive and less expensive variants of the same product. That is highly interesting because that's a mix and match of AI and also the Google shopping graph, right? They have billions of data points about all the different products on the web. And with AI, they're able to understand when a product is a cheaper alternative to another product or a more expensive alternative. They also have a feature called Try On with Google, where you can literally see fashion items being worn by models and what they would look like on different types of models, like with a certain skin color or a different body size or those kind of things. And these are all very, very interesting features. And I could totally see that Google says, okay, we're not going to launch all of SGE, but we're going to take some of these small features and implant them into public search and launch them live. So that's kind of my theory about SGE in general. And when it comes to SaaS, I think when it comes to tofu queries, it's going to be a tough time. I think SGE is going to eat up most of these, right? So if you're, for example, looking for something like what is an applicant tracking system, I'm pretty sure Google will give you that definition if they don't already do with a featured snippet. But when you look for something like, best applicant tracking system for small businesses, I'm not sure if Google will attempt to answer that question. I could see SGE trying to pull some data from third-party reviews or from sites like G2, but I think there is a much higher chance that this is only an entry point for people, and they will click instead of on the SGE links to get to an article or to a category sites where different applicant tracking systems are compared with each other. And then lastly, in the bottom of the funnel stage, when you're like, buy, now I have to think of an ATS, buy Workable, right, which is an applicant tracking system. I don't think SGE will show up at all. I think Google will just show you one link or, a set of links to the Workable homepage, because why would they need SGE for when somebody has a navigational intent, right? So that's how I see SGE impacting the different levels of the funnel. I think top of the funnel is at most endangered. I think middle of the funnel will take a hit in terms of traffic, but will still receive high quality traffic. And then bottom of the funnel, nothing changes.
So like my prediction is that SGE might be like kind of an assistant that needs to help you out. Like if it can give you an answer, so let's go like with finding like a loudspeaker for outdoor use at a price between like $200 and $300. It will basically give you an answer like as an assistant that like knows best what you exactly need. But if there's like something broader, definitely I'm in for sending it to a specific website that we'll talk about it a little bit more. So coming to, do you see any niche that will be more impacted by that? Like, because there's, for example, one theory that Google will turn into a marketplace, like Amazon, kind of. So they will basically destroy all the e-commerce and they will not send like people to e-commerce because it's, why would you do it? Like if you can close the whole cycle and know everything about the person within cookies or whatever you call them, like however you call them in the future. So like close the customer and know exactly the journey of the customer, like, but with all the e-commerce websites, kind of.
Yeah, that's my theory. I think, and it's not only a theory. I see it live right now. Google is turning into a shopping marketplace. I don't think that it will destroy e-commerce, but Google will, basically already does look like Amazon pretty much, and then be an interface for merchants to plug into and sell products on, right? So you can literally think about it like Amazon. And I think what will suffer is the content from that e-commerce sites have, the affiliate content or publishers going after affiliate content. Those are the parts of sites or the sites that are going to suffer because Google will directly send traffic to products. And you might also be able to check out directly on Google. They already have a feature called Buy on Google, where you as an e-commerce merchant can connect your checkout to your organic listings or paid listings, product listings that is. And then when somebody sees your product on Google, they can click on it, go directly to checkout and check out, right? So that's pretty much the marketplace. There's not much missing. And so I think affiliates are going to suffer, publishers are going to suffer. And then again, anybody who has very easy to replicate content right now is also going to suffer. And I mean self-created content, not user-generated content or product-generated content, but talking about self-created content. And with publishers, again, it's going to be a question mark. I think generally they will just suffer under this whole AI thing, and we can already see the publishing industry is falling apart. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. I saw a stat recently on Threads that the New York Times now employs 10% of journalists in the US, which is just nuts. But it's not because the New York Times is growing so fast; it's because everybody else is firing their people and closing shop. So that industry is already falling apart, and AI is not going to make it better.
Okay, so let's go to something more actionable. So how can business adapt their SEO strategies to leverage AI for deeper insights and more effective content creation?
Yeah. So, what is the content that can still survive when AI can replicate any content, right? It's that question we talked about before. And I thought about that long and hard because I too am a content creator, right? As you said, I have this newsletter and I was like, okay, how do why should I still write content if an AI in a couple months or years can do a better job at it? And the answer is that I can create content that's relatable and I can create content that's based on my experience. And those are really the ways to stand out. So if you as a company, you have to ask yourself the same questions. What is the content that we can create based on our experience? And what is the content that we can create that is relatable? Not easy because you're a company and you're selling to customers. You are not the customer yourself, but you have to put yourself in the customer's shoes and basically think about how you can create that experience for them. And I also see a big divergence away from that very search optimized generic content like guides, tutorials. Those are all things that machines can create much better. But when it comes to something like, I work at a 5,000 people company and I'm responsible for implementing a new workflow, or I'm responsible for change management, or I'm responsible for finding a new tool for our email marketing. That's a different story, right? And like, what if you write about those people's experience and what it's like and their concerns and their problems and maybe some anecdotes of other people who have successfully done it? Machines are not going to it's not possible for machines to create that. It's possible, right, if you for a machine to record your words and then write an article. Oh, sure, you can optimize the creation process, but the core experience, the core input, that comes from humans. And so companies have to really think about how can they go from generic content to storytelling. Storytelling is where the future is. And again, machines are good storytellers, but they're not good storytellers when it comes to a specific context or a specific problem, because that's only something humans can do, because only humans um, have experience. So that's where I see a lot of SEO strategies change. And again, I think it's much easier these days to build tools with AI and with no code solutions. And I see that as a very fruitful area in SEO that's going to grow in the future. And we're going to see some fun mini applications that drive a ton of value and also drive a ton of customers.
Okay, amazing. And do you see like a combination of like, let's say, nailing the search intent using like AI and combining it with human knowledge on top, like just to combine it together, or rather like go full storytelling and create your content that is totally different than anybody else?
Absolutely combination. Tom, I agree with you. You said that earlier. And I agree with you that the best combination is machines plus humans. It's never just one. And so humans will become so much more efficient at storytelling because of machines. And as you said, they will get more data points. But then humans will give the necessary context to machines that they need to create the thing that works best. And so you mentioned intent, right? A couple of years ago, I wrote an article about how to solve fragmented user intent. So what that means is there are queries where it's not exactly clear what people want. They're different groups, right? So some people want one thing and then other people want a different thing, but they all use the same search query. So Google fragments the intent, right? Google serves different types of results to satisfy all of these intents. And that makes it very hard for SEOs to understand what's the intent here. And AI can really help us because Google will show different SERP features to satisfy all of these intents. And we can use AI to create patterns between these SERP features and then say, oh, okay, here the primary intent is people want to buy something, or there for that keyword, the primary intent is that people want to compare something, right? It's very query dependent, but we can use AI to better understand these patterns and then very quickly come to the answer of what the intent here is that we want to go after or that we can after. So it's just a lot of data crunching and pattern matching that AI will help us with, but then humans still have to think about, okay, now I know the intent. What can I create that makes this super easy, seamless, and better than everybody else?
Exactly. So like when I'm talking to people and whenever they're saying like, okay, like all these results from SERPs like are wrong, like with and Google is basically wrong with the search intent. So I have a better idea of like answering this question. I'm telling them like, look, like you can try, but unfortunately there is a search intent behind it. Every time that you like somebody has a better idea, Google has to make a test, and I call Google a risk management tool. So every time that somebody has like a different idea, they have to take risk that it's not an answer that will like solve the problem that the person has. So they don't like it. Like combining like together, like search intent and then adding on top like a sandwich, like with my opinions, my predictions, or like anything that I can as a human add 30-40% of the content, which is totally different. This is a better way of solving like and showing up in Google.
Yeah, totally, man. I mean, I see this all the time. I'm not going to name a name, but I'm working with a very high profile company right now. You probably all know it. And they approach so they sell products. It's a direct to consumer company, and they have very specific opinions and stances on certain topics in that category, right? And so they're very shy to address certain keywords because these keywords are not representative of their view of the world, right? But the reality is that's where the attention is, right? And so you should think about Google as a way to capture attention. And then if you have a different view of the world, you can try to convert people, or you can explain your view of the world. But it doesn't diminish the fact that the reality is that the attention is on these certain keywords, right? If people search for something, it doesn't matter what you like or prefer or think. That's where the attention is, and your job is to get the attention, and then you can see how you can change people's minds.
Yeah, exactly. I totally agree with that. Uh, Going to the topic of future of organic growth in marketing, based on your experience and insights into AI-driven changes, what are the key indicators of success for organic growth in the new era that we are in?
So it's a very interesting question. Generally, of course, it's how much of a driver to the North Star metric it is, right? There are just some companies that grow much faster on paid growth or advertising. And look, like every company should advertise. Don't get me wrong; it's a core pillar of marketing. The question is to what degree. And so success to me would be that the majority, over 50% of customers comes from organic growth channels. And really great success is if that number is closer to 80 or 90%. There are some implications, right? Again, like for a company like G2, for example, it's very realistic that 80 or 90% of revenue comes from SEO, which is actually the case. But for a company like Shopify, for example, that's not realistic, right? They're going to be the contribution there is going to be much lower. So you have to figure out what's realistic and what makes sense. But generally, the biggest marker of success is that you don't need to spend as much money to advertise because you can get people or customers through other channels that are not paid. And there's a whole ecosystem to that, right? There's obviously things like SEO, brand, or direct traffic. But there's also email. There's also product-led growth, right? There is referrals. So there are many ways to get there. And the question is, how much can they offset what you would usually have to pay for? So efficiency is the biggest marker in my mind for organic growth success.
So do you think actually it's the time to make SEO, or like actually saying like, no, at the end of the game, like let's not invest in SEO because it makes no sense? This is the question of the webinar actually. So what do you think?
I think it makes sense, and to still go after SEO, and we have to like upgrade our operation system. We cannot go after it with the same old school mental model. One of these old school mental models is that SEO is isolated from the experience or from conversion rate optimization or from product-led growth. All of these come together, and that's why I call myself a growth advisor, and that's why the growth memo is about organic growth. It's not about SEO. It's about organic growth because all of these things already play together. You want to develop systems that use SEO as a channel, but that are not purely looking at SEO. They're also looking at the experience, the conversion rates, the product mechanics, and how we can scale product to drive more growth, right? So all these things go hand in hand. That's one important shift that we need to make. Two, I think SEO is still worthwhile because even like think about this, right? Like our biggest touch point with AI is text conversation. Text conversation is almost like a search. It's very close. So you could say that even modern AI is very similar to a search engine. The thing is, it's more conversational, right? So you do get a feedback signal, which you don't get on Google, but it still starts with a query. It still starts with a question. So, I have a hard time choosing between a new word for SEO that reflects that shift, and just keep calling it SEO and not inventing another buzzword. People are talking about AIO and LMMO and all that kind of stuff. It's like, man, I don't know what the right word is, but I do know that our classic understanding of SEO is not correct anymore. And so whatever we come to, it's still grounded in basic principles of SEO, but it's not the same SEO as before 2022.
I like that you call it growth because it's like kind of a combination of marketing, sales, product, and everything combined together. Because we have to remember that one thing counts for business, which is money in the end. Like it has to bring money. Otherwise, like it makes no sense just to bring traffic for the sake of traffic. So I love the idea of combining everything together that you see. But answering the question, like, would you invest in like such growth right now, or rather go to paid channels, and like where would you put your money?
I would absolutely invest in that type of growth, because I know how to do it, and so I'm very biased, right? I think the differentiation I want to make here is I would still invest in paid channels. Of course, there are many benefits to paid advertising, but I would certainly invest in organic growth as an insurance, as a way to diversify, as a way to de-risk, and as a way to grow. And if I can grow on mainly organic channels, which there are companies that do that, then I'm in a really good place. I can always go back and compensate with advertising, right? But
Yeah.
it's always tough to start on advertising and then having to cut budgets, like a lot of companies have to do these days, and then having to figure out your organic growth strategy. It never goes without like a black eye or without some scars. So yes, I would absolutely invest in organic growth. And again, there's a
But
differentiation to make between different companies.
yeah, but I like what you said, like to diversify. Like people often don't understand. They bet everything on one horse, which doesn't work. Like if it works, then it works. But the 99% of like chances, like it will not work. So diversifying is like crucial here.
Yeah, and you will find a counterexample for everything, right? So this is not an absolute. This is not the rule of law. But you'll see like TikTok, Shein, Temu. They're spending a couple $1 billion a year on social advertising, and they build massive companies. That's not sustainable. But I just want to point out, you will find a counterexample for all of these points. Generally, though, these are outliers, and most companies would do well in really investing in the organic growth.
Okay. Like for me with helpful content update, I'll be honest, like I love helpful content update because it cleaned the internet a little bit of AI written spam, human written spam, doesn't matter. It just like looked at the helpful content. And right now I can see a lot of space that you can grow in because of that. I hope that Google will continue with helpful content update because like the results are good. Like from the perspective of users, what you can see in Google, in my opinion, is at least better. From the perspective of marketers, like there's plenty of space to grow because all of a sudden they're like, we saw a lot of space last year in November, like, or even earlier in September, when helpful content update was there, like a lot of companies lost like 50% of traffic within 2 months. But it was spam, let's be honest. It was basically AI or human created spam. And that's why, like, I see a lot of chances. Like, for me, it's the biggest opportunity out there that I saw for the last decade.
And the helpful content update is very interesting. My theory is that the helpful content update looked a lot at over optimization. And so I saw a lot of content being ranked lower as a result of the helpful content update that basically said the same thing as everyone else. And there was not a lot of additional value in reading that content. And so there's this classic workflow, right, where you look at what the top results cover for a certain keyword, and then you try to do the same thing. And I think that's a good start, but we often forget in SEO what additional value we want to add or how we want to stand out. And so I saw a lot of sites losing content, losing ranks in organic traffic from the helpful content update, who basically just summarized what all the other top results were already doing. So it's almost like an anti-skyscraper update in my experience. But yeah, it hit some sites really, really hard. And so I think it just goes back to that same notion where Google has to make sure they surface the most quality content. And that gets harder because it's so much easier to create content, not just with AI, but even before then. And so many more companies are creating content as a way to grow. So Google just has to set the bar higher and higher and higher for anybody who wants to rank in the top 3.
Yeah, I can see that. Like, especially like many SEO tools like out there in the last 2-3 years, they were just all about keyword stuffing. So like put this amount of keywords here and there. This will optimize like the whole thing. And to be honest, like from Google's perspective, well, it's all about answering the search intent. If you add like these keywords into and keyword stuff the article, let's be honest, that's not answering the question of like users. Like focus on the intent, as you mentioned, instead of optimizing for using this word 5 times, that word 3 times, and something else.
You see, I agree with you. And part of the reason we have come to this place is because, again, content is a growth vehicle and organic traffic converts. And so that led to lots of people and companies going out and buying content or full time hiring marketers who write about topics that they don't understand so much about. And so, that's when you don't know or when you don't know a topic, you try to quickly learn from other sources about that topic, but then the content that comes out can never compete with content that's created by a specialist who knows these things inside out. And so, it doesn't. It's no surprise that we've seen this flood of kind of mediocre content because only true specialists paired with really good editors and writers can create outstanding, amazing content. It's actually really hard to create fantastic content. And so, what I see a lot of times is that when you read through the content that's been punished by the helpful content update, a lot of times when you sit next to the person who wrote it and you go through it, you like quickly find out, okay, yeah, there's some parts where we're not going into enough depth, or we're not covering this topic as well as we could be, or there's some things missing, or maybe even some things wrong. And Google's understanding of content has gotten a lot better in the last couple of years. So you often kind of, when you dig deeper, you see why that content lost organic traffic. But I think it goes back to Google just having to be more strict about what good and bad is.
So to everybody, if you're a special matter expert or you're a content writer, use special matter experts to feed like data, like ideas into your content, because like that definitely works. I can also see it from my side. Like add your opinions. Like try not to fight AI. Try to help it out. Work together, because that makes much more sense. Okay, one of the last questions that I have for you, from your experience and observations, what are some common misconceptions about AI's impact on SEO that you would like to debunk?
Yeah, one is certainly that it's easy to create AI content. We also have to define what AI content actually means. But what I see fail over and over is something like going to ChatGPT and then entering a prompt that says something like write a blog article about topic X. That will certainly lead to really poor results because it's a way too open-ended question. But if you go in and you have some of the prompts that I've developed with clients took us days of work to just get them right. And then the content is really good, but you need to set very clear boundaries and be very specific about what you want, where you want it, how long it should be. You need to work around the token limit, at least for now. And so the myth I want to debunk is that it's quick to create AI content. Once you have the prompt, that's a different story. Then you can scale AI content production as long as you do it programmatically. But until you get there, it takes a long time. Maybe another myth to debunk is that all AI content is bad, right? So it goes both ways. I don't think any extreme is right. Whether it's the extreme of saying, "Oh yeah, AI content is great and always works great," or whether saying AI always works poorly. Because I have the proof and the results. I have developed AI content with clients, and it works really, really well. You just need to do it right, and you need to not cut any corners. But AI content can absolutely work well. And the third myth, and it's still TBD if that actually plays out or not, that I want to debunk, hopefully debunk, is that AI content will not succeed, and we will all go back to a time before AI got popular. I also don't see that happening. I think we're kind of on this boat ride, and there's the river doesn't stop flowing. The river is going to continue flowing. So there is no going back. And so I do understand it's uncomfortable for people to think about how to navigate those streams, but we're here, and we're not going to go back. It's going to continue. And the scary thing is that how quickly these LLMs improve and how quickly they get really good. And so that's why when I'm excited about AI, it's not because what I'm seeing today is mind blowing. It's there's some good stuff out there, but when I see how far we have come in just a single year, and I extrapolate that 5 more years into the future, that's when I'm like, whew, buckle your seatbelts.
Yeah, definitely. Like when in the podcast of Lex Friedman, somebody said like we have aliens, actual aliens here. So like, and they're not going anywhere.
Yeah.
They will stay.
Yeah, that was
And
Noah Harari who wrote *Sapiens*, the book. Yeah, he's. I think he's
I
right.
think, yeah, might be him. This is it. But to the first thing that you said, like I always try to say that, like when you're talking to AI, treat it, them, him as a human, like that you just met. Like, and you have to define exactly what you want. Just think about it like if you would say to your like friend, teammate, exactly explain what you want, what would you say? Like, don't leave anything out there, like for them to think through and do it in a different way. Like, because AI, let's say that AI was trained on the whole internet. Like, let's assume, but it doesn't mean that it has like the whole internet in one finger. It's like us. Like we went to school a couple of years ago, but it doesn't mean that we know by heart every single thing that we learned there. We know how to resolve problems, and this is what AI does, but it doesn't know by heart every single thing that it was trained on. So treat AI as you would talk to a human.
Yeah, it's such an interesting point you make there, Tom. I want to just quickly comment on it because um, we humans don't have great memories compared to, say, like a machine. And we even, our memory changes. So some things that we remember might actually, like over time, we remember them differently, right? Because we add some story to it and some color and some everything. The fun thing is machines could actually work around that problem because they have databases and all that other kind of stuff. They could technically recite everything perfectly they learned, but that is actually a bad thing. And in machine learning, it's called memorization. And you actually
Mm-hmm.
want to minimize memorization as much as possible. Because if you don't, the machine will cite copyrighted, or doesn't have to be copyright material, but it will recite training data. And that's not the purpose of machine learning. The purpose is to use training data so the machine can come up with something else. That something else is still based on probability, but it should not recite the exact same thing. And so that's actually where machines and humans are very similar. But our memory is not probabilistic; it's deterministic, and the machine memory is probabilistic. So what the highest probability is, and so again, there's an opportunity for us to not create stuff based on the average, which is what machines do, but create based on the outliers.
Yeah, amazing, amazing. So this will be the end of the webinar. Thank you everybody for listening to us. Again, like if you want to follow Kevin, like go to LinkedIn, find him, and definitely sign up for his growth memo. He told me before the webinar he has a goal to reach 1,000 paid subscribers this year. Like he's at 250, I think.
Yes.
So like it's worth it. Like really amazing stuff. He shares really amazing insights. And I just love to follow Kevin. If you want any help, like from my side, also like you know where to find me on LinkedIn, and hope to see you there.
Thanks for having me, Tom. Thanks everyone for tuning in. This was a treat, and yeah, I was very happy to be on. So much fun. Thanks so much.
Amazing talk. Cheers. Bye.
Cheers.